The last time anyone had seen Dominic Vale smile in public, he'd been standing at the altar. It had been captured perfectly in photographs. Custom suit, soft lighting, the faintest curve of happiness touching his mouth as he waited. And then, she hadn't walked down the aisle. The story had traveled faster than dignity ever could. By sunset, the headlines were everywhere. Billionaire abandoned at wedding. Investors pretended not to notice. Colleagues offered sympathy that felt like curiosity disguised as concern. The public devoured it. Dominic didn't comment. He simply stopped attending events, stopped hosting dinners, stopped laughing. It had been 11 months, and no one, not his board, not his assistant, not even his own brother, had seen him relax since. Until the night a stranger laughed at him. It wasn't cruel laughter. It wasn't mocking. It was spontaneous and entirely unexpected. Dominic Vale did not lose his footing often, but he did that evening. The charity gala had been unavoidable, a contractual obligation. He had agreed to sponsor the City Arts Foundation long before his personal life had imploded. He stood near the back of the ballroom, hands clasped loosely behind him, watching donors network under chandeliers that cost more than some homes. He wore composure like armor, and then someone walked straight into him. Champagne tilted, balance shifted. He instinctively reached out and caught her before she could fall. Her heel snapped, and instead of gasping or apologizing dramatically, she laughed. A full, bright, completely unfiltered laugh. "Oh no," she said between breaths. "That was expensive, wasn't it?" He blinked. Her heel lay broken on the marble floor. The champagne had splashed lightly onto his sleeve, and she was laughing. "I'm so sorry," she added quickly, still smiling. "I promise I don't normally attack strangers in tuxedos." He stared at her for a second longer than polite. Dark hair falling loosely around her shoulders. Simple navy dress. No performance. No calculation. Just warmth. "It's fine," he said evenly. His voice was controlled. Always controlled. She looked up at him properly then. Recognition dawned. Oh, there it was. He was used to that expression. The slight widening of eyes. The realization. The careful adjustment in posture once his name connected to his face. "You're Dominic Vale," she said. "Yes." A beat. "And I just assaulted you." The corner of his mouth twitched before he could stop it. She saw it. Her eyes lit slightly. "I knew you could," she murmured. "Could what?" "Move your face." Took him a second. Then, against his will, he laughed. It was quiet, low, but real. She froze. "You weren't supposed to actually do it," she said softly. "You're the one who challenged me." She studied him with curious intensity. "You don't laugh much, do you?" "No." Tragic. He should have walked away. He should have dismissed her as another socially fearless extrovert who didn't understand boundaries. Instead, he found himself saying, "Your shoe." She glanced down at it. "Oh, right." She bent to pick up the broken heel, wobbling slightly. He reached out instinctively. "Careful." She steadied herself with his arm. "I'm Elena, by the way." Of course she was. Not Elizabeth. Not Catherine. Not anyone polished. "Elena." "I'm aware," he replied dryly. She smiled. "Of course you are. Billionaires probably have dossiers on everyone. Only the dangerous ones." "Good. I'd like to think I'm high risk." Something about her energy didn't press against him. It moved around him, effortlessly. "You should sit," he said finally. "I should go home," she corrected. "Your heel is broken." "I noticed." A faint grin returned to her mouth. "And I suspect I'm not important enough for the valet to prioritize." He exhaled slowly. He hadn't intended to stay long tonight. He hadn't intended to escort anyone anywhere. Yet, "Wait here," he said. She tilted her head. That sounded authoritative. It was. He stepped away briefly, spoke quietly with the event coordinator, and returned minutes later with a pair of temporary flats someone had sourced from a nearby boutique. She stared at them. "You didn't have to do that." "I know." She slipped them on carefully. "Thank you." There was no flirtation in her voice, no strategic softness, just gratitude. He found himself studying her again. "You're not afraid of me," he observed. "Should I be? Most people are. Most people haven't just broken a heel in front of you." He nearly smiled again. Nearly. She noticed anyway. "You almost did it." "Did what?" Smiled. He shook his head faintly. "You're very observant." "I'm a teacher." He blinked. "Of middle school literature." That surprised him. "You don't look intimidated." "By you?" "Yes." She shrugged lightly. "You're a man in a tuxedo. I've handled 13-year-olds with opinions." The image caught him off guard. And before he could stop himself, he laughed again. This time, clear, unmistakable. She stilled. "There it is," she whispered softly. "What?" "Proof you're not made of stone." The room felt different suddenly. Quieter. He hadn't laughed like that in nearly a year. He hadn't meant to, and he wasn't sure how she'd managed it. But she had. And for the first time since his world had fallen apart, something inside him shifted. Just slightly. Dominic did not believe in small accidents. He believed in patterns. And yet, 3 days after the gala, he found himself thinking about a broken heel and a woman who had laughed in a room full of polished people. He hadn't asked for her number. He hadn't intended to. He had escorted her to the exit, ensured she reached her rideshare safely, and returned to the ballroom before anyone noticed his absence. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't, because when he'd gotten home that night, he had realized something unsettling. He had replayed her laugh. Twice. By Monday morning, he was irritated with himself. He didn't chase strangers. He didn't indulge in distractions. And he certainly didn't pursue women who collided with him by chance. Yet at 10:47 a.m., he found himself asking his assistant, "Do we have a full guest list from Saturday?" His assistant, Nora, paused only slightly. "Yes. Send it." 10 minutes later, he had it. He didn't scroll quickly. He read carefully. Elena Reyes. Occupation, literature teacher. School district affiliation listed. No notable affiliations. No corporate connections. No strategic advantages. He stared at her name longer than necessary. Then he did something uncharacteristic. He picked up the phone. Elena had just finished explaining metaphor to a classroom of 7th graders when her cell buzzed in her desk drawer. She ignored it. She always did during school hours. But when she saw the missed call later, her brow furrowed. Unknown number. Voicemail. She stepped into the hallway and pressed play. "Ms. Reyes, this is Dominic Vale." She nearly dropped the phone. "I believe I owe you a replacement heel." She blinked. "You can call me back if you'd like to discuss it." A pause. "And thank you for the other night." The message ended. Elena stood frozen in the hallway, surrounded by lockers and the distant sound of teenagers arguing about something trivial. He called. She hadn't expected that. Not because she thought he was cruel, but because men like Dominic Vale did not pursue teachers from public schools. They dated women who understood the language of boardrooms. She stared at the number for a full 30 seconds before dialing back. He answered immediately. "Hello. You don't waste time," she said. "I prefer clarity." She smiled faintly. "I noticed." A pause. "How are your shoes?" he asked. "Alive. The emergency flats are surprisingly comfortable." "I'm glad." Silence settled briefly. Neither rushed to fill it. "You didn't have to call," she said finally. "I know. And yet, he repeated. She leaned against the hallway wall. "Are you this direct with everyone?" "Yes." "That must be exhausting." "It filters efficiently." She laughed softly. "There it is again," she said. "What?" "That almost smile in your voice." He exhaled quietly. "You're very perceptive." "I read literature for a living." Another pause. "Would you allow me to replace the shoe properly?" he asked. She considered it. "Yes." "When are you free?" "After 4 p.m. "I'll send a car." She snorted before she could stop herself. "I have one." It was an offer. It was a limousine disguised as an apology. He almost smiled. I'll meet you somewhere instead. Good. Do you prefer coffee or bookstores? That caught him off guard. Why those? You don't strike me as a nightclub person. I'm not. Then coffee or books? He hesitated only slightly. Books. Tomorrow. Yes. She gave him the address of a small independent bookstore near her school. Not polished. Not curated for elite clientele. Just real. The next afternoon, Dominic arrived 10 minutes early. He always did. The bookstore bell chimed as he entered. The space smelled like paper and cinnamon. He scanned the room and saw her sitting cross-legged on the floor near the poetry section, arguing with a small boy about whether villains deserved redemption arcs. You're wrong, the boy insisted. They're not born villains. Some are. Name one. The boy paused. She grinned. That's what I thought. She looked up then, saw him, and her entire expression shifted, not into awe, into delight. You came. I said I would. He noticed the way she didn't stand immediately, didn't adjust her posture, didn't perform recognition. She simply brushed dust from her skirt and stood naturally. You're early, she said. I'm punctual. That's intimidating. It's respectful. She smiled. Fair. The boy tugged her sleeve. Is he the tuxedo guy? She blinked. Eli. What? You told us about him. Dominic raised a brow. You did. Only because you tripped me, she replied calmly. The boy studied him. Are you famous? Sometimes, Dominic answered. Are you rich? Elena gasped softly. Eli. It's fine, Dominic said evenly. Yes. The boy nodded thoughtfully. Cool. And ran off. Elena covered her face briefly. Middle schoolers have no filter. I prefer that. She studied him carefully. You do. Yes. She didn't press further. Instead, she gestured toward the shelves. Ready to choose a replacement shoe? I thought this was a bookstore. It is. And the shoe? After. He blinked. She grinned. Balance. He found himself walking beside her through the aisles. She stopped at a shelf and handed him a slim novel. Read the first page. I don't read on command. You do now. There was no arrogance in her voice, just playfulness. He opened it. Read silently. She watched him, not evaluating his wealth, not scanning his watch, just watching his reaction. When he looked up, she asked, Well, it's honest, he said. Good. You like honesty. I like people who mean what they say. He met her gaze. And if they don't? I don't keep them. There was something unspoken in that sentence. He recognized it, because he had once kept someone who hadn't meant what she said, and it had nearly broken him. Elena didn't know that yet, but she would, eventually, and for the first time since the altar, Dominic felt something unfamiliar. Not infatuation, not distraction, hope, small, careful, but present. Dominic hadn't told her about the wedding. Not that first afternoon in the bookstore. Not the second time they met for coffee. Not even the third evening when she had laughed so hard at one of his dry observations that he had felt something inside his chest unlock. But Elena wasn't unaware. She had recognized his name the night of the gala. And curiosity was a quiet but persistent thing. She didn't Google him immediately. She resisted. For 2 weeks. Then one evening, alone on her couch, she typed his name into the search bar. The headlines were still there. Billionaire groom left at altar. Fiancé calls off wedding hours before ceremony. Sources close to couple cite emotional differences. She closed the laptop slowly. The pieces aligned. The guarded posture. The careful speech. The way he measured every emotional step like it might detonate beneath him. The next time they met, she watched him differently. They were walking through a park near the river, late afternoon sun filtering through trees. He was telling her about a bridge project his company had completed. His tone steady, detached, professional. She stopped walking. Dominic. He turned slightly. Yes. You don't talk about yourself. I am talking about myself. No, she said gently. You're talking about work. He studied her for a moment. What would you like to know? She hesitated. Why you stopped laughing? His jaw tightened slightly. That question landed closer than she intended. I didn't stop, he replied evenly. You did. Silence. The wind shifted softly between them. I read about it, she said carefully. His expression didn't change, but something inside him did. You read tabloids? I read everything. A beat. You should know I didn't leave her. I assumed you didn't. He blinked slightly. You did. Yes. Why? Because you don't strike me as a man who runs. The words landed in a place he hadn't touched in months. She left 3 hours before the ceremony, he said quietly. Elena didn't interrupt. She sent a message. Elena's chest tightened. A message? She whispered. Yes. He inhaled slowly. She said she couldn't marry someone who felt emotionally distant. The irony tasted bitter. Elena stepped closer without thinking. You're not distant, she said softly. I am careful. That's different. She didn't think so. And do you? He didn't answer immediately, because that question was more dangerous than she realized. Careful people don't always look warm, he said finally. Warmth doesn't have to be loud. She reached out slowly and touched his hand. Not to fix him. Not to rescue. Just contact. You're allowed to laugh again, she said. He almost did. Almost. Instead, he looked at her like she was offering something he wasn't sure he deserved. You make that sound simple. It is. It wasn't simple before. That's because you were with the wrong person. The bluntness startled him. You're very certain. I'm a teacher, she said lightly. I identify incompatible personalities daily. That earned a faint curve of his mouth. She saw it. There, she said softly. He exhaled. You don't treat me differently, he observed. Should I? Most people do. I'm not most people. I've noticed. They resumed walking, but something had shifted. The silence between them was no longer fragile. It was thoughtful. Later that evening, as he drove her home, she asked, Why didn't you tell me? About the wedding? Yes. He kept his eyes on the road. Because I didn't want to become that headline again. Her heart clenched. You're not. It follows me. Only if you let it. He glanced at her briefly. That's optimistic. That's accurate. A small smile returned. You're very confident for someone who broke a heel on marble. I recovered. He nodded once. You did. When they reached her apartment, she didn't open the door immediately. She turned toward him instead. You're not broken, she said quietly. His jaw flexed slightly. That's generous. It's observant. You don't know that. I do. How? Because broken people don't protect others from their own pain. The statement hit him squarely. He had spent 11 months protecting investors from scandal, protecting his family from embarrassment, protecting his staff from fallout. But no one had considered protecting him. You don't need to carry it alone, she added softly. He studied her carefully. You're not afraid, he said. Of what? Of me. She leaned slightly closer. Why would I be? I don't offer easy. I don't want easy. Silence stretched between them, and for the first time, he reached for her, not out of instinct, not out of politeness, out of choice. His fingers brushed her jaw gently. You're dangerous, he murmured. Why? You make me consider things I locked away. She smiled faintly. Maybe they needed air. He leaned in, slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their first kiss wasn't dramatic. It wasn't desperate. It was careful, measured, but alive. When they parted, he rested his forehead lightly against hers. I don't want to lose this, he admitted quietly. You won't, she whispered, and for the first time since the altar, he believed it. It didn't take long for the world to notice. Dominic Vale did not go unnoticed when he stepped into restaurants or attended city events. His presence had weight and cameras followed weight. For months, he had avoided them. Now he didn't, because Elena walked beside him. The first time they were photographed together, it wasn't glamorous. They were leaving a small Italian restaurant near the river. He had sauce on his sleeve. She was laughing at something he had just muttered under his breath about overpriced mineral water. The photo captured the exact second he smiled at her. Why, unrestricted. By morning, it was everywhere. Vale moves on. Billionaire seen laughing again. Who is the woman who brought him back? Elena stared at the headline over her morning coffee and felt something unfamiliar coil in her stomach. She hadn't dated anyone high-profile before. She hadn't had strangers debate her worth online. The comments were predictable. Teacher? Sure. Rebound. Strategic sympathy relationship. She closed the article. Dominic was still asleep in her bed, one arm resting loosely across her waist. She looked at him differently in that moment. Not as the man who built bridges, not as the abandoned groom, but as someone who had risked being seen again. And now she was being dissected because of it. Her phone buzzed. A text from her colleague. Is this real? She typed back. Yes. 3 dots appeared instantly. Are you okay? She hesitated. Was she? She glanced toward the bedroom again. Yes. But the noise felt loud. Later that afternoon, she met him outside his office building. Reporters lingered at a distance. He noticed them first. They'll fade, he said quietly. I know. You don't have to do this publicly. She frowned slightly. I'm not hiding. I don't want you pressured. I'm not pressured. He studied her carefully. You're quieter than usual. That's observant. I'm always observant. She exhaled softly. I didn't expect it to feel like this. Like what? Like I need to prove I'm not temporary. His expression shifted. You don't. I know. But it feels like I do. He stepped closer. You are not a placeholder, he said firmly. I didn't say I was. You implied it. Silence settled between them. I don't want to be the woman who fixed you, she said softly. He stilled. That's not what you are. But that's what they'll say. They don't know you. They don't need to. He watched her closely. I didn't choose you because you fixed me, he said quietly. I chose you because you saw me. Her throat tightened. There's a difference. And if I stop making you laugh? She asked. I'll remind you how, he replied evenly. She almost smiled. Almost. He noticed. You're doing it again, he said. Doing what? Pulling away. She blinked. I'm not. You are. The certainty in his voice wasn't accusatory. It was concerned. I don't want to become your recovery narrative, she said. You're not. But I was the first person you laughed with after. Yes. That matters. It does. And that scares me. He was quiet for a long moment. Do you want to leave? He asked finally. The question was soft. Not defensive. Just clear. Her heart jolted. No. Then stay. The simplicity of it unsettled her. Dominic, if this is about perception, we handle it together. And if it's about me? He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Then you tell me the truth. She swallowed. The truth is I don't know how to date someone who carries headlines behind him. That's fair. I don't know how to exist in your world. You don't have to exist in my world. She frowned. What does that mean? It means I step into yours too. She stared at him. You would. Yes. Dominic Vale at a middle school literature fundraiser? If necessary. She couldn't help it. She laughed. Surprised them both. There, he said softly. There what? You. The tension eased slightly, but it didn't disappear entirely. That night, she lay awake beside him. He was asleep, peaceful, unburdened in a way she hadn't seen before, and the thought crept in again. What if she was temporary? Not because he would replace her, but because the weight of his life would swallow her eventually. The next morning, she didn't text him first. She didn't call. She needed quiet. He noticed. Of course he did. By afternoon, he stood outside her school, not dramatic, not urgent, just present. When she stepped outside and saw him leaning against his car, she exhaled. You didn't answer my message, he said gently. I needed space. From me. From everything. He nodded once. Okay. That wasn't what she expected. No questions? She asked. You said you needed space. You're not worried? I trust you. The steadiness hit her again. But this time, it wasn't comforting. It was overwhelming. What if I decide this is too much? She asked suddenly. Then you decide. You wouldn't fight? I don't fight to keep people who don't want to stay. The echo of his past lingered in that sentence. She saw it clearly now. He had learned to let go before being left. Her chest tightened painfully. I don't want to leave, she said. Then don't. He stepped closer, brushing his thumb gently along her cheek. You are not here to repair me, he said quietly. You're here because I choose you. And you choose easily? She challenged. No, he replied evenly. I choose carefully. Silence stretched between them. Then, I'm afraid, she admitted. Of what? Of loving someone the world already watched lose. He held her gaze. And I'm afraid of loving someone who might leave. The honesty was raw, real. And for the first time, they were equally vulnerable. They did not fix it with a dramatic kiss. They did not pretend fear wasn't there. They sat with it. That night, Dominic came to her apartment instead of asking her to return to his. No headlines, no photographers, no marble floors or city skyline views. Just her small living room, mismatched pillows, and a bookshelf that bowed slightly in the middle from overuse. He stood near the window while she made tea. You're not a project, he said quietly. She handed him a cup. I know. Then why does it feel like you're bracing for impact? She didn't answer immediately, because the truth was inconvenient. Because I watched you lose someone publicly, she said, and I don't want to become another story attached to that. He studied her carefully. I didn't lose her, he said. She frowned slightly. She chose differently. That's losing. No, he replied evenly. Losing implies something was taken. She left because we weren't aligned. She absorbed that. You don't see it as humiliation? It was, he admitted. But it was also clarity. The word echoed her own from weeks ago. Clarity. I'm not afraid of headlines, he continued. I'm afraid of silence. She looked at him sharply. What do you mean? I'm afraid of waking up one morning and realizing I misread you. Her chest tightened. You didn't. I don't assume anymore. That was the difference. Before, he had assumed stability. Now he chose consciously. I don't want to run, she said softly. Then don't. I don't want to feel small. You won't. You can't promise that. No, he agreed calmly. But I can promise I won't ask you to shrink. Her throat burned. Dominic. Yes. If I stay fully. Good. And if I leave, I let you. That was what terrified her. Not control. Freedom. She set her cup down and crossed the room. You don't fight. I don't cage. She studied his face carefully. Then I'll fight for both of us. His expression shifted. Not into relief. Into something deeper. Respect. He reached for her hand slowly. Stay, he said quietly. She did. The months that followed were not quiet. There were events. There were articles. There were moments where she questioned whether she belonged in a room full of executives discussing infrastructure investments. And there were moments where he sat in a folding chair at her school auditorium listening to 12-year-olds recite Shakespeare with unwavering attention. He did not look bored. He did not check his watch. He applauded the loudest. Her colleagues noticed. The world adjusted. Slowly. But the narrative changed. From rebound to partnership. From rescue to mutual grounding. And one evening, almost exactly a year after the gala, he brought her back to the same ballroom. It was quieter this time. A smaller fundraiser. No frenzy. She wore a simple emerald dress. He wore the same calm. You're nervous, she observed softly. I don't get nervous. You do tonight. He glanced at her briefly. Observant. Always. He led her toward the back of the room. The same place they had collided months ago. "This is where you broke your heel," he said. "This is where you nearly smiled." He exhaled softly. "And this is where I laughed." "Yes." She looked at him carefully. "You remember it exactly." "I remember everything about that night." He turned to face her fully. "You were the only person in the room who didn't treat me like glass." Her breath hitched. "You laughed at me. You deserved it. And then you made me do it too." He stepped closer. "You were the only woman who could make me laugh after my world fell apart." The room faded. The chandelier light softened. He reached into his jacket. Her heart stopped. "I don't want a rescue," he said steadily. "I don't want a replacement. I don't want someone who fixes headlines." He lowered to one knee. "I want the woman who broke a heel and laughed anyway." Tears filled her eyes instantly. "I want the teacher who argued redemption arcs with a 7th grader." Her laugh escaped through the tears. "And I want the woman who stays when fear shows up." He opened the velvet box. The ring was elegant, understated, intentional. "Marry me," he said. "Not because I need saving. Not because you complete a story." His voice softened. "Marry me because you choose me. And because I choose you." She didn't hesitate. "Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger. Her hands trembled as she pulled him up. She kissed him fiercely. Alive. Certain. The room applauded softly, but neither of them heard it. They only heard each other. They married in spring. Small ceremony. Private garden. No press. No spectacle. Just family and a few close friends. When she walked down the aisle, he didn't look like a man bracing for abandonment. He looked like a man anchored. His vows were simple. "I will never ask you to shrink." She answered, "I will never laugh alone." 2 years later, on a quiet Sunday morning, Elena stood in their kitchen while Dominic made coffee. Sunlight spilled across the counter. The world had stopped speculating. It had moved on, but they hadn't. They had built something steady. He still worked long hours. She still graded papers late into the night. And sometimes, when the weight of his past crept in, she would simply say, "Move your face." He would, and he would laugh. Not because she healed him, not because she replaced someone, but because she stayed, and because he chose her, every single day.